Hello, folks, and welcome to the Back Home Network's breaking news coverage of IU portal transfer info. Galen Clavio from Crimson Cast, Bob Moats, and Mike Wiemuth from the X's and Joe's podcast. We might have Jared Morris jumping on here shortly. We appreciate all of you joining us live here in the middle of the afternoon on Monday. Gentlemen, it's been a week, more or less, since the portal opened, and Indiana's finally got their first confirmed commit. Jaeden Mustaf from Georgia Tech. It was announced from multiple different locations that he is going to be joining the Hoosiers next year. We're going to talk through all of that. We've got some clips we're going to show you. You never know. We might have another one pop in the middle of everything. It's exciting times, a lot of moving parts right now. But great to see all of you folks in the comments, whether you're on Twitter or whether you're on YouTube. And we appreciate you joining the Back Home Network. Bob, Mike, great to see you guys. We keep meeting like this in April. It's great to be back talking IU roster building once again.
It's spring in Indiana, which means transfer portal miss is upon us. And basically, after looking at Mike's tweet about a week ago, as to when things break, like the seventh day of portal miss is usually when it starts. That's when the gift giving starts. You open the packages and see what's in front of you. And so I think that's what we're looking at right now with Mustaf coming to campus and going to be a Hoosier starting next season.
Yeah. At least so far, it's not Portal Festivus. We haven't gotten to the airing of grievances quite yet, but we'll wait till a few whiffs, take place before we get to that. But yeah, go ahead.
That was last week.
Say, let's postpone Portal Festivus as long as humanly possible.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I like these kind of like quick pods that we do, especially when they're just arranged within like 45 minutes. I was thinking as I was the lunch I was about to sit down to, I had to take on out of the restaurant as takeout. So I was actually thinking, like, do these portal kids understand us podcasters actually have lunch plans?
They do not.
Yeah.
And, for all they know, they might be committing to a West Coast school and they'd be intervening in breakfast.
Exactly.
But
all they're doing is making generational wealth decisions for their families. I mean, like, what else could they be more important than what we're doing?
So, and we do have a limited time to talk through this today as work does call, but this fortunately synced up with all of our lunch hours. So anyway, let's make it happen. Let's talk through this commit. Let's give some basics first. Bob, would you like to kind of walk us through who is Jaeden Mustaf? Where does he come from? And what makes him an intriguing pickup for this Indiana basketball program?
So I'll kind of start with the back part first, which is what makes him intriguing for IU. Unlike, hello, Jethro, how you doing, buddy? I would say he's definitely a combo type guard, more of a wing type player. 6'5", 6'6". We used to always say 6'6" with hair. Comes from the DMV originally. Spent a time at Overtime Elite, kind of doing that work. And Mike can tell you a lot more about kind of him pre-college. But what I can say about him at this point, he really is one of those types of guys that looks to have a lot of upside going into his junior season. So when we're talking about more diversity from a standpoint of scorer diversity, game diversity, he's really good at getting downhill. He's about 2-to-1 getting rim shots and lane penetration shots versus jump shooting. So he's definitely somebody who can break you down, attack closeouts, really good in pick and roll as well as isolation, where he's in pretty much the top quartile in both according to Synergy. And really, again, just a player that IU had wanted in the past and for whatever reason backed out 2 years ago and now has come back under new management to see about getting him on campus.
Yeah, Mike, this is where a lot of times with the portal, we forget that a year or two ago, in some cases, these guys were recruits. And, if we had been looking at Mustaf as an incoming freshman coming to Indiana, we'd be pretty excited, not just because of his ranking, which was, I think, right in the general area that you like to see recruits coming in, but also his list of suitors, the teams that offered him during his recruitment process, is littered with major conference programs that you would like to be in competition for with recruits.
Yeah. Yeah, he came as Bob said before, he did came from the DMV originally and then moved down to Overtime Elite in Atlanta. But he was originally at DeMatha, so he was right in the Kenny Johnson sphere of influence in terms of his high school. And yeah, you're right. People may forget the fact that IU actually recruited him before. He was heavily recruited by IU at one point, and one of the problems is that at the time, when he moved down to Atlanta, he going to Overtime Elite, you're basically within about 5 minutes of Georgia Tech's campus in terms of, I mean, when I say 5 minutes, I mean almost 5 minutes walking. That's how close Overtime Elite is to Georgia Tech. So that was a pretty easy pickup for Stoudemire at the time. And yeah, in terms of his, I guess his profile in high school, I think Bob, laid it out pretty well. I mean, he's a physical, well-built, sort of tweener, big guard slash wing downhill driver, decent shooter. I would not say that he's still, I would not say that's one of his strengths, but it's really not a weakness. I mean, he does shoot at least a pretty decent clip, draws fouls pretty well. He has a +3 wingspan, and his athleticism is pretty decent. I wouldn't say he's a skywalker by any sense, but yeah, I mean, he is legit, physically speaking, and in terms of his output in high school, he is a legit, 3380 sweet spot kind of recruit, and he was pretty well chased in high school at the time.
You look at the offers he had coming out of high school. You had Arkansas, you had Maryland, Georgia, Iowa, Miami, Pitt, Texas A&M, NC State, Florida State, Georgetown. I mean, it's a good neighborhood to be in if you're Indiana. And Indiana offered as well at that point. Didn't work out that time around, but now he comes in, and as we look at some of the footage, and I'm going to roll some B-roll here. We should be able to talk over this, but Bob was nice enough to cut this up, and you'll be able to see Mustaf.
So real quick, he's number 3 in the corner playing. This is a defensive clip. I kind of wanted to show this part to kind of see him towards the end of the play, because as the ball swings around, good help side position, fighting through a couple screens there, and then he's able to recover it, on the switch and get into the passing lane.
Yeah.
So here's another one here. This is going to be on the offensive end. I think he will be. I think he's in the right corner, moving up to the right slot.
Yep.
And then. Nope, I'm sorry. Yeah, there he is on the right.
Yeah,
he's on the attack on the end.
Yeah, he's the ball handler. Right.
I was trying to look at the numbers here. So when you look at Mustaf there again, driving, attacking closeouts very effectively. This is going to show some playmaking skills of his. So again, kind of watching him come off as we're setting a screen here, or he sets the screen, and the ball now swings, and you look at him attack. After he gets the ball back here off of a handoff, attacks the lane, jump stop, finds the guy making 45 cuts. So that's again that slasher. Those two. So the slasher. Here's one where you're going to see him kind of create his own shot off of a baseline out of bounds play. Again, he's got it at ISO. Again, he's going to get it back off of some basically a ghost action or a pop action, and a step back 3.
Yep.
And that's where Mike was kind of talking about this. Where shooting is not necessarily a strong suit. He shot 38%, which is a good conversion rate, but he only from 3, but he only attempted, I think, 55 on the season. So it wasn't like he was a high volume shooter. 73% from the line. Someone asked a question. I mean, I don't think he's fully a good comp to Adrian Woolley from Louisville, but I think on impact at times, when you looked at kind of his Kemba, that's where he was in the Kemba range was Woolley at this point. So he can actually create his own shot, create for others. And I think that once he gets on a better team, that could be the other process too. Because Georgia Tech was dreadfully bad last year.
Real bad.
Like
they were. I mean, Georgia Tech on the they lost, I think, their last 13 games in a row, and this is where sometimes it could be hard to judge players and what they can do, because you also have them in that context. But I think it's worth noting that this is a player that you look at their numbers from Georgia Tech last year, played 66% of available minutes, had an offensive rating of 106 on a team that was not very good offensively. And you look through, this is a player that obviously can drive, has the ability to do some things on the defensive glass, was able to pass the ball fairly well, but was playing in a not particularly functional system. Still was able to get in double figures, I think, in like 9 out of the last 11 games that he played this year. And that included a 28-point performance against Clemson in the ACC tournament, a game that they almost won, which would have been a huge upset for Georgia Tech going up against a Clemson team that ended up in the NCAA tournament. So there's a lot to like physically about Mustaf. And one of the things that became obviously a dominant storyline about IU's roster this last year was the physical inadequacy of some players in terms of being able to handle what the Big Ten was throwing at them, especially as the season wore on. Mike, maybe let me go to you on this first. Like, Mustaf seems to have that physicality that was lacking last year. And also, I think that translates to both sides of the court. And that to me is really important, because one of the things that was notable about IU last year was that their defensive ability and intensity kind of wore down as the season went along. And this is a player that looks like they could play consistently throughout the course of the season and be effective on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, that's right, Galen. And you think about it, just thinking about the players that IU brought in. So many of them last year came from, let's say, lower tier schools in terms of, where they were in college, but also correlates to the fact that they just didn't really play a lot in high school against the best competition. They were not on, a lot of them were not even on the EYBL circuit. Some of them are on like the grassroots circuits or less. Guys like Mustaf, I mean, he was the point guard for Boo Williams, and the whole time he was playing for Boo. So that's obviously a very prime position within the high school AU circuit. So he's had a lot of, before he even arrived on campus at Georgia Tech, he had a lot of experience in terms of playing against the kind of physicality that you would expect to see in the Big Ten or SEC. So he's definitely well suited for this level of contact. And one thing you'll notice about Mustaf, and I think is one of his more underrated qualities that he has, is he doesn't turn the ball over a lot when he's in the lane. He can kind of he can take the 2 dribble drive, pull up, hit contact, either do a lob or, put the shot up or, kick out. And he doesn't turn the ball over a lot doing that. Unfortunately, you saw a lot of times IU just could not do those very basic 2-3 dribble drive entries into the lane without turning it over, or either getting knocked out or bumped off their line and tossing it out of bounds. So that's like one of those qualities that you really see with these more physical kind of guards and wings. And one of the other things I do like about Jaden is, like, even if he gets like knocked off his line, one strength I've always noticed that he has very good lob potential. I mean, his ability to look for lobs for the bigs is something I've noticed a lot on his reel, going back to when he was, playing for Overtime Elite. So you're right. I mean, just given the fact that he's had so much experience going back to when he's like 16 years old, playing against the most elite kind of talent, this is not new to him. So I think the transition for him might be a little bit smoother than you had for IU kids last year.
And what I think is going to be interesting with Mustaf is, you look at last year's Georgia Tech team, and they really didn't have a focal point offensively. And so I don't think he'll be the focal point offensively, or he's not coming in expecting to be the focal point offensively for Indiana, which I think might have been a little bit of an issue with some of the players Indiana brought in last year, who were largely focal points at the mid-major level, wherever they were playing, whether that was Connerway or Wilkerson or Breed Bailey. What I do find fascinating about Mustaf, the one statistic that really pops for me in ACC play, he was top 25 in fouls drawn per 40 minutes and was top 10 in free throw rate. So this is a guy that knows how to draw contact en route to the basket and knows how to, I think, put himself in a position where he can force defenders to make a bad choice. And, I think obviously we'll see if his 2-point shooting can start to improve, and he obviously we need to see more evidence on the 3-point line, but it seems pretty diverse in terms of what his potential skill set is. And I think a lot of how he gets used, Bob, is going to be dependent on who else is Indiana bringing in, and I would envision him as, we're envisioning Mustaf as probably part of the starting unit, I think, but obviously that's going to also be dependent on who else is, Darren DeVries and Kenny Johnson, who are they cooking up in the kitchen right now in terms of bringing in the next wave, because they're really going to have to flesh that starting lineup out almost entirely through the portal.
It looks that way, and I would kind of start, first off looking at what we already knew was coming in, that where he complements well. You put him in the starting lineup, but you also have freshmen. You're not really forcing a Prince Alexander Moody or
Bob. Sorry, breaking news. We have another commit that has just dropped.
Yeah.
Whoa!
I was just about to tell you.
This, according to Deshaun London, Duke transfer Darren Harris has committed to IU. So it's all happening right now. Cue the Ron Paul gif. Let's finish talking about Mustaf while I cut some clips real quick here to put in for Harris. But let's continue your thought, Bob. Go ahead.
So so you're not really having to, now with both of these guys, you're not really having to rush your freshmen into production. So you could definitely say both, and I think with Mustaf, you could definitely get a 3. With what DeVries, we saw him run last year with a lot of that sort of, with a lot of pick and roll work, a lot of flare screening, a lot of attacking closeouts or getting off, coming off curl cuts or direct back cuts, screen cuts, moving, or basically screen rolls, even on the perimeter. You're looking at a guy with Mustaf that can really do a lot of that, and then also be able to be more of an attacker once you get the ball into position out on the wing. Tucker DeVries had moments where he could actually get the ball there from kind of almost like a power back sort of way. Lamar Wilkerson got a lot better at it as the season went on. I feel like you have with Mustaf just a much smoother player to get that ball where DeVries wants to get it, which is in the lane, and then either dumping it down or getting it to kickouts. Now you add Darren Harris to the mix, and Mike, I know you and I talked about him. Like, he coming out of high school the kid was they thought he was a fireballer, wasn't he?
Yeah, they were comparing him to I think they're comparing him to Booker coming out of like high school in terms of like his build and his shooting ability. So yeah,
we're talking Harris, right?
Yes.
Talk about Harris for a little bit, guys. So we do have some video of Harris that I'm going to get ready to roll up here in this live. First of all, great to see everybody. We've got 850 people watching live, and they said IU basketball was dead. It's not. Also, shout out to the Trilly private chat Discord, the guys and gals in there watching us as well. We appreciate you folks being there.
Yep.
I missed the cheesecake conversation this morning, so I really need to.
You missed very little, is what I will say.
Okay.
I love that. I love going in there. It's like you never know what you're going to get. It's almost like walking in one of our conversations.
It's like one of my favorite games is going in and just checking the latest posts and seeing how do you get from Harambe and cheesecake and roll back to see like how did that even start in a basketball conversation?
So yeah. Or Artemis 2 talking about monkeys. Moving right along, though, it's one of those deals that I think with Harris, again, fireballer, he's sweet spot recruit. Anybody that John Shire is going to recruit and bring to campus and spend 2 years of investment in is probably a kid that's worth looking at a second time. I think part of it is it's almost like this is a sort of player who was not good enough to break through the quadruple his freshman year. And then Evans, I believe it was this year. Yeah, that when you start thinking about who was ahead of him who are basically 2 lottery picks or 2 high-level draft kids. Yeah, I mean, he was going to be a tough one to kind of pull in. But again, I think he's the sort of guy that he's not really what he can drive the ball. He's a better downhill guy than, let's say, Nick Dorn was, who's leaving the program. But I also think he's the sort of player that that can definitely be a shooter that if you get him some more volume, he can definitely do some damage. Mike, where was he? He's a sweet spot kid, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was more in the McDonald's All-American range. So he's just a tad higher.
Yeah. But if you go back and just give his numbers real quick, he was so first of all, Mustaf was the 67th ranked prospect according to 24/7 Sports. And we mentioned the number of offers he had. Harris was the 40th ranked prospect coming out of high school. was 11th of all the small forwards. And, you look through the offer list he had, it was a similar kind of list to what we were talking about before. I think it was like Duke, Maryland, Georgetown, West Virginia. He was very much
the East Coast.
East Coast type of recruit. Harris coming out of Paul VI Catholic in Fairfax, Virginia. So shockingly, another kid from the DMV, this time from the V side of things. But anyway, sorry, Mike, go ahead. And other context there worth noting as far as his recruitment or where he looked, where it looked like he was coming out of high school.
Yeah, so he's one of those players that every year in the high school recruiting, there's about like 3 or 4 kids that are not elite athletes. They're solid athletes, but they're freakish shooters. And so normally their athleticism would only allow them to be, let's say, like a 150, 100 range recruit, but their shooting just pulls them way up to, let's say, like the 30, 40 range. And Harris is definitely one of those kids. And obviously, why Duke went after him. Yeah. And yeah, he was a team takeover kid. So again, Kenny Johnson, earning his pay yet again. And this will be the 3rd DC Catholic League kid that's now going to be joining IU. Like, I think half the roster right now is technically DC Catholic League. It's Mustaf.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, you know what?
I'm okay with that.
As it turns out, I mean, it's powered the Big East and the ACC for years. Why not us?
Exactly.
We've got some clips here from Harris. Again, thank you to Bob for cutting these. What do we got going on here?
Okay, this is him on defense here, and I kind of wanted to show this because one of IU's biggest problems, and he'll be up right now, he's at the left slot, and you're going to watch him as he's guarding without fouling. And
wait, are you allowed to do that?
You are allowed to do that. You notice how he had his chest out, moved his feet, got there. Here you're going to kind of watch in transition, moving up the floor here. He's going to be holding the corner on the left side, so left corner, and you'll kind of just see him moving around, moving through the offense for a reversal. Nice little save there, and then watch him as he lifts up on a guarded jump shot and hits that one. So like Mike was showing you the shooting ability there in that situation. I believe this next one might be one of these. I think I had him showing just a little bit of the ability to probe a little bit and kind of break defense down as he kicks out. Yeah, this is a probe where he, again, just makes a quick pass. Again, he'll look to attack a second time off of a ball screen, kind of stretches it out, and then finds a wing player who's a pretty good shooter there, who's able to attack a closeout. So is that sort of, you don't always necessarily get the assist necessarily, but you do get a situation where he could do that. This is one where he just comes off a ball screen and just dots it. So beating drop coverage. And if you get a big man, let's not play hypotheticals, but let's play hypotheticals from a standpoint of you get a 6'11 kid, or 6'10, 6'11 kid who's great off cuts, great off of rolling to the basket, and he decides to roll versus pop. And now all of a sudden they're bringing, they're dropping down or they're going underneath the screen. Harris gets wide open up there, drills a 3. That's going to make defenses play you more honestly and force more tags, which opens up a kid like Mustaf when you rotate the ball to him. Because who are you? The question always becomes in 2-man game, who do you tag off of?
Right.
And you're not going to tag off Harris. You're probably not going to tag off of Mustaf. And when you start putting, let's say, Marcus Burton or Marcus Burton-esque, let's say a Martin Burton-esque type of lead guard who can get downhill, attack the lane, and as well as maybe a 6'11 kid with an SEC like an SEC level big that might be able to get there. Let's just dream. Let's just dream. We got the AT-AT and the Sky Striker for Christmas this year. That's what we're looking for here. That attack mode where now these guys are now in favorable matchups because if someone tags off them now, they're doing a long closeout. They can attack it, or in Harris's case, like you saw, he could hit a contested jump shot fairly easily.
So one of the things that's notable here, again, you've got athleticism and you've got physicality in these two players, and both of them are about the same height. You've got some switching ability defensively that comes with the approach that seems to be taken. This is, I think, what would have been the idealized version of what Darren DeVries wanted to do last year, but they got too late of a start for a variety of reasons that have been litigated to death throughout the course of the last couple of months. But this should make people, I think, feel better from a construction standpoint. And I'll note, and several people are mentioning it in the chat, and it's real. there was a note from a key area of the internet that we are likely to see Marcus Burton, the Notre Dame point guard from last year, also coming to Indiana. Now, it hasn't been officially announced, so we're not breaking news here, I don't think, but this has been floating around quite a bit. I think 24/7 crystal balled it, and it also got pointed out on Trilly Donovan as well. So if hypothetically that's your grouping, how does that trio, obviously knowing you're going to need the 4 and the 5 filled out at that point, but how does that trio strike you in terms of what they can bring to the table and what we might be expecting to see from a style of play perspective this upcoming year? Mike, let me start with you on that.
Yeah, well, if Burton's probably, he's either the number 1 or 2 best point guard right now in the portal. Some people might say Rob Wright. I actually like Burton slightly better, but as Bob said, if you bring a guy like Burton in, he's so fast and he changes the speed of your ability to get in the lane and break down defenses so effectively. That's only going to open up opportunities for guys like Harris and Mustaf. And given that those guys can actually do things by themselves, it just complete changes the dynamic of where IU was last year compared to this year. Because again, what we talked about on a prior podcast, at the end of last year, IU's point guard position, their Kemba rating was in like the 700s, which is basically in the NEAC in terms of like where the point guard position you expect to find. You bring a guy like Burton in, that's up to like top 20 almost instantaneously, given like his skills. So yeah, I think it would completely change the speed, the dynamic qualities, especially on the offensive end, but especially, on the defensive end as well. I mean, all those guys can switch off effectively, and Burton, especially because his hands are so quick, he creates a lot of turnovers. I know, Galen, you were smartly highlighting the fact that at the end of last year, IU was not creating turnovers, and that was a big problem. And so I think having those kind of guys like coming in is going to change, just the ability of the team to create turnovers.
And Jeff, rightly noting that if you've got Burton coming in, you've got 3 players that could be there potentially multiple years. This was another issue with this last roster from the previous year, was that it was very much even if this works, you're starting over next year. And this, the way that I think is structured, I think the idea that Indiana is going to rocket itself into a position where they're immediately competitive at the highest levels of college basketball is probably fanciful. It's not out of the realm of possibility, but it's probably fanciful, depending on what they get at the 4 and the 5. But by doing it this way, you give yourself a lot longer runway if you're Darren DeVries. So if you can get this group to play the way you want to play, if you can improve your offensive efficiency, if you can make your defensive efficiency more stable throughout the year, you get yourself into the tournament. Now you give yourself some veterans who understand what your culture is going to be, but you also make it an even more attractive place for people to come next year. And you've also got these 3 freshmen coming in who have the ability to play where it makes sense, develop, and then become bigger contributors for that following year's roster. So it opens up just so many more options in terms of what you're doing, what you can do, and what trajectory the program appears to be going. It's a huge difference from even how we felt a week ago.
So when you look at again, I talk about the tiers, your top tier, the top 2%, your 1s and 2 seeds, and then your 5, then your next 3%, which is your 3 to 5s. And then the next tier, so the top 5%, then the next 10%. IU is towards the bottom of that top 10, of that next 10% in Ken Pom, and was more in the middle of it, according to Torvik. So let's just say that there, if you get a 10 to 15 spot jump there, and you get yourself off the bubble into that 6-7 range, then you're looking at the Todd Golden flip. And the Todd Golden flip was what, Todd Golden had a horrid first season. Came back the second season, got his team firmly into the tournament as a 7 seed. I'm not saying you win a natty year 3, but then you can maybe make that next jump from there. It also, as Galen's hinting at, I mean, the magic number was minimum getting 30 to 30% minutes continuity. Unless you're Duke and you're bringing in a group of McDonald's All-Americans all year as your freshmen with a couple holdovers, you're going to be looking, they were at 25% minutes continuity. Michigan was at 30. So that 30% to 50% minutes continuity helps because as you were mentioning, that whole the whole gelling together and getting that year, getting a year together within. And we got Travis Branham coming in the next class. So the 26s, we have these three. Travis Branham comes in 27, where you can actually, you're not throwing your freshmen necessarily to the wolves. You're not forcing them to develop faster like we had to do in the old days pre-portal. Now you can give them a year or two to kind of develop and then kind of get them into positions as sophomores, juniors, as significant players carrying a significant load, and then filling using the portal versus building with the portal and filling with your freshmen. So I think that's really what we're going to see. We're seeing the vision in place. And right now, like if you're a Louisville fan, if you're a Kentucky fan right now, you're probably sweating more bullets than IU fans, to be perfectly honest. Louisville, yeah, they got a couple big recruits coming in at this point, but the question is how much did they spend on two guys, knowing what they had to beat. And Kentucky right now, you're looking at a situation where they're window shopping, but they can't get in the store, it looks like at times, especially on the high school level, but now more and more on the portal level. So I feel a little better about where we are than maybe I was a week ago at this time. And that's a great point Andy just brought up here where, yeah, if you get a kid like a Cheryl, you get it, you can bring Sicily in off the bench, or if you had to put Sicily at the 4, you can. I mean, those are the bigs are going to be the next step. That's the next domino to fall. And at this point, this is a program, I think, Jay Horry said in our Discord over the Back Home Network, you got this is a program that got Sam Alexis an 8 BPM player.
Yeah.
Imagine what you could do with a guy that's a high major body.
It is exciting to think about. And I from my perspective, I just look at it and I say to myself, you knew, or you should have known, and we tried to make this point on the pod a couple of times. The roster, you try to put as good of a face on the roster as you can if you're Darren DeVries, but for a variety of reasons, that was not an ideal roster. We were pretty excited when we got those signings last year at this time because it's like, oh, this looks like it will be good in conjunction with other pieces, but the pieces that needed to be there for it to be good in conjunction with never really got signed. And this is a different approach. I like this approach. I like the fact that they've got some freshmen coming in that they'll be able to plug in with these guys immediately is really the way that you need to be doing it. It's just a shame it had to happen a year in, but I think that especially if we see what happens with the remainder of the signings in this portal, we can make a final determination on what this roster is going to look like as a whole. Before we move on, just a reminder, folks, we are brought to you by Home Field Apparel, your place to go for the finest in college fashions, and they just launched a new Little 500 line, and if you scan that QR code up in the upper left corner, it'll take you right to that Little 500 lineup. Great looking stuff. New sweatshirt, a hoodie, some really cool 80s themed graphic tees around Little 500. And of course, Little 5 happening next Friday and Saturday right here in Bloomington. If you would like to check out a new documentary sponsored, this event is sponsored by Home Field at the Buskirk Trumley Theater, 7 p.m. Tuesday of next week. I guess that would be Tuesday the 21st. We'll be doing a live showing of the 75th anniversary documentary about the Little 500, since this is the 75th anniversary. Hard to believe. That documentary put together by Blue Line, and then we'll have the 2 Days in April miniseries documentary that'll also be shown at that event as well. It's free and open to the public, and we're hoping that we'll have some Little 5 merch as well available for purchase. So swing on by if you get a chance. We'd love to have you folks down there. Mike, as we think through a little bit more regarding the two players that we know for certain are going to be coming to IU out of this mix, as you look at the way that IU would like to play, and I think it may be helpful to reset people's expectations around what having an idealized physical lineup would look like with all of this. A lot of talk when Darren DeVries got hired about how he runs a Greg McDermott-esque system from Creighton. That was where his initial tutelage came from as a coach. The one thing that I think people might have a question about, like, you don't have the same kind of focus on shooting in the way that you had last year. How do you see this reconciling? Do you expect them to go out and try to get shooters, or does this look like more of an offense that is predicated around the shooting coming from elsewhere? Is this more of a let's drive to the basket more and be more physical type of approach? How do you see this shaking out based upon the early returns of what we're seeing?
Yeah, well, I mean, until you see the entire roster, and especially like who they're chasing at the 4 and 5, you won't know for sure whether going after another Ryan Kalkenbrenner type or a big that's more of a rim protector. So we'll find that out as the roster gets built. I think a lot of this is just a recognition that there's a minimum threshold of physicality and athleticism that you need to compete at this level, even if you have the best scheme available, even if you have really upper tier elite shooters on your squad. And I think that was the lesson that was learned this past year. It would have been great if Lamar Wilkerson and Tucker DeVries and Nick Dorn got a lot of wide open 3-pointers. I think the offense would have been great if that had actually taken place. The problem is you just didn't have the guys that actually make that happen. And so I think there's probably going to be more of a focus on getting the players that set up the offense and create those opportunities rather than the guys that are necessarily just taking the shots. So I think there's probably, I would estimate, to be a little bit more balance in terms of, the shot makers versus the shot creators. And also, again, everyone kind of focuses on the 3-point shooting. So much of like McDermott offense is really just about efficiency. It's like they look at 3-point shots that are open as efficient shots. They also want to get a lot of layups and shots around the rim, or opportunities to go to the free throw line. So I think that we're always tend to over focus on just one facet of the efficiency in terms of like what the offense is doing. So I do think that they're going to try to do their best to make sure that the 2-point field goal percentage goes up. It was top 10, it was like, top 10, 15 this year in terms of, their efficiency at shooting twos. The problem is they were next to last in terms of 2-point attempts. So I think that's probably the area of opportunity they're looking at, is keeping their percentage up on the twos, but making sure that we're at least somewhere in the middle in terms of 2-point attempts, just, pushing us up from like 364 to maybe in the 200s at least, and in terms of trying to balance out the offense. So I would say that based upon who they brought in so far, those would be the things I think that they're trying to focus on.
Oh, good.
Moving from 50% of your field goal attempts to be threes to 40% would probably be a good thing for this team and this program, because it also means you get to the line more frequently, which is again another issue when you look at IU's defensive issues. Not turning the ball, we talked about the fouling, but when you're getting outscored at the line, it doesn't matter if you're hitting more threes. You don't want to be losing that type of gap in that sort of way. So they need to get the line better.
And one last thing I'll say on Harris that is exciting, in relatively limited time, he had an offensive efficiency of 126. So this is a guy in what opportunities he had to shoot was pretty efficient with the way that he was doing it. And so I think that's an important thing to keep in mind as we move forward.
If you want one note, I'll say about Harris, Galen. If you really want to learn more about that kid, look at his high school reel, not his college reel. Look up his performance at the Chipotle Nationals against Montverde, and that'll give you a sense of what that kid can do, because that's actually where he's going up against like real competition. Because unfortunately, when he was playing at Duke, he was sometimes playing in garbage time, unfortunately. So I think you'll get a lot more sense of what can this kid do when he's against like real elite talent, if you look at some of his high school stuff.
We only have a limited amount of time since I got to go back to work, but a couple of things. We had a question earlier from Banner 6, not about the portal, but now that we have an idea of a couple of the players coming into the portal, do we see any of the freshmen making an immediate impact next year? Bob, you want to start on that one?
Yeah, I mean, you look at Prince Alexander Moody, had just a monster all-star game from a scoring standpoint. Von Corella, has done incredibly well with his, by leveling up, going to where he went in Phoenix to kind of more of a basketball type academy. But I think the three of them, it'll be interesting to see if how much run Manhurts gets, because he's moving up a year. I know we've had Mike and I have had some conversation about, would Manhurts, do you save a year of eligibility? That was a conversation that was being had when he was recruited. But I think you can look at all three of them coming in as key bench pieces, and also as a bit of an insurance policy here. I think all three can obviously play at this level, but I think a lot of it is you give them some margin for error by having the guys that you have ahead of them with starters type minutes. There's something else too. They're going up against now Division I bodies in practice, or high major bodies in practice. They're working it out with each other, in that also. So that learning curve may accelerate, that physicality curve may accelerate with your freshmen, because now they're not going to be, they're going to have to really kind of just learn to develop playing day to day with people like, Harris, Mustaf, and others. But yeah, I could see the Carvalho and Prince Alexander Moody, to me, seem to be the ones that are most on track to maybe make a significant contribution, which, yeah, call that what it is, 10 to 20 minutes a game, chip in some points, and don't hurt the team.
Mike, any other thoughts on that?
No, I would just I just ditto what Bob said. Yeah, I think because Moody and Carvalho probably played a little bit better competition, at least of recent. I think their bodies were a little bit better filled out. I think that typically is what you see correlate to freshman impact in terms of when they're coming from high school. I think their bigger impact is going to be next year, is not just in terms of what they can probably provide in terms of their skill sets and all that, is that they're going to make the portal less of an emergency issue for the program. It does not have to be, oh my God, we need to have 5 starters every year in the portal. Mm-hmm. So that's probably their best value going forward in the program, is like, okay, finally we're getting some balance in the roster now, and we can, the sourcing and pooling for talent is no longer just centered on one particular area.
Well, guys, it's great to have some positive news to talk about. And I'll just say this. I mean, obviously, we try to judge players in terms of idealized best fit, how we see them, how we think they're going to integrate into what we think Indiana is going to be doing. And so think of this as a tentative, very positive podcast as we look through the things that these players have done thus far, the physical profile that they fill, and how we think that this will factor in to what Indiana is going to be doing on the basketball floor. I will say these feel like very targeted types of players that fit a very particular profile. And, I do obviously think that this is where having additional eyes and ears and minds in the player personnel and scouting area is helpful, because it's about how do you integrate all of these things into a team that's going to work, and how do you do it in a financially sustainable way, I guess, for lack of a better term. And, Bob, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it's not all about the flash of a particular name. Obviously, I think many people saw Flory Badunga and Jackson Shellstad commit to Louisville this weekend, and those are big names. But having Flory come in as your centerpiece creates a lot of questions offensively that I think would have been a struggle for Indiana, especially given how Darren DeVries likes to run his offense. Great defensive player, obviously, and can be a game changer on that end. But as we think about the roster, it's all going to be part of a continuum. And obviously there's more pieces that have to be officially announced. And as those come, we will be trying to live podcast on them as much as we can, pending on our schedules. But we have right now over 1,450 people watching live here in the middle of the afternoon on Monday. So whether you watched it live or whether you're watching/listening after the fact, hopefully this was helpful to all of you to learn a little bit more about these players. Any final thoughts from you, gentlemen, before we wrap up? Mike, I'll start with you.
Yeah, no, this is obviously good news, like you said. And the thing I always look for when you're going into year 2 of any coaching hire is how quickly can you 180 the problems you had from year 1. That's usually one of the biggest hinge variables you see between the coaches that make it and the ones that struggle. And I would say, at least so far, with the 2 guys they brought in so far today, definitely puts you at a margin different than where you were last year. And I think that's the thing you just want to see if you're an IU fan is a continuation of that as you fill in more positions, not only just with the starters, but the guys that are, let's say, the 6th or 7th players in the rotation. So far, good news.
Bob?
It again, Portal Miss is a crazy time of year. It's all of the angst and excitement of following recruiting. For those of you who go on, whether it's Peaks, Inside the Hall, On 3, or Trilly, and where we do the high school recruiting, where Mike and I for years were talking, about this, and now it's all compressed into basically a 3-week window of pure madness. It's like Cabbage Patch Kids are dropped, and there's a bunch of moms sitting out there ready to get them for their kids. And that's what it feels like. So at this point, there's a lot of rumors, a lot of innuendo, a lot of speculation, a lot of conversation. I think and I think it's easy to get kind of caught up into, oh no, we can doom this right now, knowing full well that there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And what the staff has shown from time to time is that there's usually a plan in place. That when like when we went through the Anthony Thompson recruitment a few months ago, all of a sudden Thompson decides to go to Ohio State for the money that they signed him for, and IU was just right on the heels of Von Carvalho. So I think you're going to see a lot of this where it's like, let the whole thing play out. As we've said a lot, wait till Mother's Day to make your final decision.
Yep.
It's a long way away, and trying to do this like you're day trading is probably not good for your mental health or good for your kids, your dog, or your fish that you're trying to feed, and you may forget to do so because you're always refreshing Trilly to make sure that's happening. So
yeah,
it's a good start though. I'll give it I'll maintain that at this point.
Yeah, it's a good start, and obviously you got to wait till everybody gets on the floor before you know it's actually going to work. But feels like a nice beginning, and I think a more sustainable beginning than what we saw last year at this point. So with that, we're going to go ahead and break. We will come back if there are more announcements or signings at some point today, tomorrow. So keep it tuned to the Back Home Network. Follow Crimson Cast. Follow Mike Wiemuth. Follow Bob Moats. Get over on the Back Home Network Discord, and hopefully we can also sync up with Jared and the rest of the crew at Assembly Call at some point and talk through things in more depth. But we appreciate you folks joining us in the middle of the day. For Mike Wiemuth, for Bob Moats, I'm Galen Clavio saying thanks for joining us, folks. We'll catch you on the flip side. Stay never daunted. So long, everybody.